All right. I think we'll go ahead. Hello, everybody. I'm Amber Forrester, chair this year for the DPO committee. Kai Turner is is the co-chair. We're working together completely here, and Kimberly Wisdom has been so great as to help us along the way as I am trying to fill my admin position to be able to take that pressure off a little bit. I hope everybody's having a great week. It's been busy. It's a busy week, right? I don't know. They are all busy weeks. I think we'd like to start off by introducing Bill Beatty, the new DPO for OPRD. He is taking over for Jan, who just told us in the other meeting that this is her last week. So she is officially gets to do whatever she retire, right? She's retiring and gonna have a great time, I'm sure. And Bill is taking over for her. So Bill, if you'd like to introduce yourself to the group and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm Bill Beatty. I've been with state government for 8 years. That's all right. And state procurement for 5. Been in procurement private sector for 14 years and government or management in state government and the private sector for roughly 20 years. And proud to take this position. I wish Jan the best. I'd like to be retired myself, but it isn't in the cards yet. But pretty excited and ready to rock and roll.
Awesome. Great. How long have you been on now?
Since Monday.
Since Monday. Wow.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Been
right.
A lot to absorb. Yeah.
Nice. That's really great. Yeah. Awesome. Well, again, just want to welcome everybody and to our first meeting of the year. We are kind of going through some general updates. I just wanted to give you an update. The DPO exec committee just met. We have a kind of a really quick brief meeting before this meeting. And there is a committee being set up for that will be specific to looking at raising some of the thresholds that we have, raising the intermediate threshold to 250, just kind of taking a look at our thresholds, recognizing that this can kind of stall our work a little bit. So if you're GPO and you were unable to attend the last meeting, we are kind of doing a call out to people who'd like to be on this work group committee. It's going to be led by Kelly at DAS. So and bringing in several parties to just sort of talk this through and hopefully get something ready for a potential ledge concept for session. So that would be kind of great. So if you're interested in being a part of that, you can either say so in the chat or you can reach out to Kimberly Wisdom and let her know, and then she'll connect you with the group. And we're looking at early February as being the first meeting for this group to get together. Any questions about that before I move on? All right. Let's see. Okay, moving forward. So it looks like our first agenda item would be an organ buys update. This time they gave us kind of a very big update last time. So this one's just kind of a general update for them to let us know kind of how things are going and anything they want us to know. And there'll be a
Hi, Amber. This is Nicole Brazil. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Perfect. Can I do a quick mic check on Carter? I know he was questioning it earlier. Carter, is your mic working?
I hear you loud and clear, Nicole. Do you hear me?
We do. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, let me share my screen here. All right, hopefully folks can see the presentation. So what we want to cover today is we want to do a status update on the project and then an update on what is coming up over the next 6 months, and then just give some general updates and reminders. We also want to share a bit about standard reports in Oregon buys. This is information that was just shared at the Financial Leadership Council, and we now want to share that here with our DPOs. We'll address just kind of a reminder about project versus operational discussions and where we are in the project, and then have a period for questions and answers. So with that, I will hand it over to Carter to give us our project status update.
Thanks, Nicole. Thanks for checking my mic. Oh, now I got some feedback. Does everybody hear the feedback also?
I think it
I'll
just.
try to move ahead. I've got 2 slides here that I want to show to you. The first one.
Hey, Carter, can you
It's a lot of noise.
put the microphone back, the mute back on your computer?
Yeah. Actually, I'm on the phone line, so I'm going to switch.
That sounds good, Carter.
Going to switch microphones, okay?
Okay, thank you.
I hope that's better. Can you hear me?
That seems better.
Yes, sir.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, thank you. 2 slides here. The first one, I just want to highlight a couple of things about where we are in our wave 1. And the first thing is that at the end of last year, we received all of the agency data collection templates from our 24 wave 1 agencies. This is the information that describes the agency users, their departments, and their address locations. And also, we are halfway through our process design sessions for our wave 1 agencies. By the end of this week, we will have completed agency process designs for requisitions and for purchase orders. And so this process design work, it's based on the enterprise process designs that were developed in October and November. And so the agency processes are going to begin with those enterprise processes, then add or remove steps that are identified in order to best support the agency. And so the second thing I want to highlight here is that our self-paced learning curriculum has been completed on schedule. And those trainings are currently available for our agency core teams, those teams that are working through the agency process designs. And rollout of the self-paced training is going to be in March for the rest of the agency staff. So that's kind of the high-level update, and I'll walk through our 6-month look ahead on the next slide. So first of all, I want to talk about our test plan. This is the test plan that we used for the enterprise process validation, and it is completing its independent quality management review, our QMS review. And so our joint project team will take the recommendations that come out of that review and incorporate those for use for our wave 1 agency validation process. That would be item 5 in this list below. I'm just going to indicate that the work is ongoing for our change readiness, and we're going to begin really rolling out those communications next month. Item 3 is showing our wave 1 agency process design work. I mentioned that we've been working on requisitions and purchase orders for the first half, and the second half we'll be working through receiving and invoicing. So once the process designs are completed, item 5 showing the process validation work. That work is supposed to assure that our organ buys system is configured appropriately for all of our wave 1 agencies. And then you can see that the training is going to be concurrent with the validation processes. Item 7 shows prior to our June 1st go live, we're going to use the 6 weeks prior to prepare and then execute our go live checklist. After the go live, we'll initiate work on the preliminary planning for wave 2, incorporating lessons learned from wave 1. And I just have item 12 there indicating that we have some ongoing work with ODOT teams to develop a financial interface for ODOT. So that's kind of the big picture 6-month look ahead, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay. Oh, there is one in the chat, Carter. Are those days workday or calendar days?
So those are, I'm going to look at those. Those should be work days. And I'm looking at specifically item number 9, which has a 6/8 start date and a 7/6 end date, and it says 21 days. So I'm pretty certain that those are work days.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I'm not seeing anything else. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I have one really quick. I'm trying to recall who's in wave 1, just to give us an idea of some of the agencies that are going through it. And I know you shared this with us last time, I think. But is it like, is DOC in 1 or OSP?
OSP is.
OSP.
I'll drop a link.
Okay.
I'll drop a link in
cool.
the chat where you can see who's in which waves.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Thank you, Carter. Okay, we'll go ahead and move to our next slide. Carter will put that link in our chat. So with that, I just want to talk about a few updates and reminders. So folks should have gotten emails when this was released, but we did do a quarterly release. 16.2 went into production this month. And one thing that we just wanted to highlight here is that the advanced search has been optimized. So when folks were going in and doing the advanced search for master blanket purchase orders, the results were taking quite a while to come back. And so that search has been optimized. We just wanted to point that piece out. And then to do another reminder, we continue to get some questions around intergovernmental agreements. So putting ORS 190s into Oregon buys. So just a reminder again, that the governmental entities, so the other state agency or local government or whomever that is an agreement with, does need to create a vendor registration because they're going to be in the system as a supplier for you to select them on that master blanket when you put in your ORS 190. And so state agencies who are participating in these agreements must register for a supplier account. It does not replace your existing internal agency account, but when you do set up that supplier account, it will ask for your agency's tax ID number. And then just some information here that if you go in to do that and you get an error that your tax ID is already in use, it means somebody else from your agency has already done that step of creating that vendor registration. You can always contact the Oregon by Supplier Help Desk, and that's listed here. So we'll make sure this goes out as PowerPoint afterwards so folks have that information. Okay, moving on to the next one. So a little bit about standard reports in Oregon buys. So again, this information was just shared at Financial Leadership Council last week. So we wanted to bring this to the DPOs as well. Some of these are reports that are useful now in Oregon buys after phase 1 has gone live. Some are probably more applicable to phase 2. But at least we wanted to share this list so that folks can go in and see what's out there. This is something that you can get to now with an Oregon buys login. You're just going to go up to that red kind of gear icon in the upper right corner, and you can access them from there. We are currently working on user security control reports. So we have a work group that's working on that piece. And then once we get that information and those reports developed, we can share more about that. And during wave 2 and 3 of this phase 2 of the project, we'll review other reports that agencies might need. So these are all the standard reports that come with the Periscope product. And then once we're in and using the system, if we have additional things that we think we may need, then we can do that requirement gathering during those 2 subsequent waves. So just to touch on those standard purchasing reports, this is a list of all of the reports that are available. At the end of this PowerPoint, we'll also provide a link to kind of a description of each one of these, so you don't have to take a guess at what they mean, but it gives a little bit more context about what those reports can be used for. Okay, and then lastly, I just wanted to touch on project versus operational discussions. So we are in the midst of wave 1 of our second phase of the project. So depending on the wave that your agency is enrolled in, some agencies are going to have different levels of exposure to parts of the system moving forward. And so because of that, we'd like to hold off on any of the project-specific questions, just sort of as a a general note and going forward for like our DPO discussions or other outreach meetings, we're happy to answer those kind of project specific questions in the WAVE core team meetings, but because not everybody has seen this and may not be familiar with it, it's a little harder to do that at the DPO meetings. However, if there are phase 1 operational questions that you guys have, that's absolutely something we can speak to during DPO. So I would just say, if there's anything that you do want us to cover in one of these upcoming meetings, if you can put that in the chat, we'll collect that. Because we want to make these meetings and these presentations as helpful to you as they can be. So if you have any questions that you've had coming up in your agency a lot, or if you just like us to maybe touch on how something works, absolutely happy to do that. Just let us know in the chat and we'll gather those for the future. And lastly, this is the link to the handout that I had referenced around reports, and I'm just going to pop over to show you what comes up with this link. So this is the Oregon by Standard Reports Guide, and it gives some instructions. I'm not going to go through this. You guys can read this offline, but it does give instructions on how to access and run those reports. And then scrolling down here, bear with me. This is where it starts to describe all of the different reports. So it'll give information about what each report really returns and how it can be used. So that's a lot of great information. We just wanted to point out that that's out there. And again, that is here on this link in this PowerPoint that we'll send out. All right. And with that, I think we've got about 2 minutes before our time is up. Are there any questions we can speak to today? You're welcome, Philip. Thank you.
All right. If there are any questions,
I'm not
thank
seeing
you so
any.
much. That was very
Thanks a
helpful.
lot.
Appreciate it. Can I ask, and this is just kind of I'm sure there's someone, but is there somebody in Wave 1 on this call?
This is Shannon.
The DAS is in Wave 1.
Oh, cool. I was just kind of curious if, just to kind of just high level, how's it going? I'm in Wave 3, so we're in Wave 3, so we have a little ways to go, but it would be cool, and not to put anybody on the spot again. I'm good at that, I guess. But just kind of if there's anything that because as we get closer to that, to that point, just thinking about if there's any work that we should think about or be doing, or things that would be like oh gosh, it would have been great if we would have known to do a little bit of this pre-work before we were in the wave, that maybe could just help those in Wave 2, right, that are eventually here. Time seems to go so fast nowadays. But if there's any knowledge you wanted to share about how it's going, about this is what I would advise if I was in Wave 2, right, and know what I know now.
Well, heck, I might be a little bit biased, Amber, as this project team reports up to me, but I think it's going very well. We're on schedule and on budget so far in terms of the Wave 1. I try to attend most of the DAS core team meetings. I'd say they're organized better than the Wave 1 meetings. We're actually doing work in the meetings instead of having assignments that we go away and do to some degree. So I think it's moving more smoothly. I don't think I know yet what I would advise is sort of tips and tricks to be smoother next time. If there are others that are on Wave 1 who want to offer, that would be great.
Well, this is Melissa. ODOT is in all 3 waves, but what I would really encourage folks to do is to do what they can to document their processes, because they need to understand what their current processes are and how they're going to change. And if you have them documented, even at a process map level, then you will understand where there's going to be changes. You'll also be able to understand maybe if there's some, and I know this is not the right word, Nicole, but customization, because you'll be able to make some choices about things that you would like to see out of the system that you can build. And I think you really want to understand what's unique about your agency our needs and then understanding what you're going to need from the system, especially in the space of reporting. So that's what I would really encourage folks to do, is to meet with their employees and really understand their process, so that when it comes time to changing the process, they are better equipped to make those changes.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, dig in documentation. Oh, perfect. Great. Well, thank you. That's really heavy. And maybe we'll kind of continue asking that questions as we move forward, as you guys get farther into wave one. We'd love to hear testimonies and video lessons learned.
And Amber, I'll just mention, this is Shannon. You know, we with the Secretary of State kind of did things weird. We started out on the reverse end to make it harder. I apologize, the bells are ringing. You were talking about dogs earlier, letting themselves out, ringing bells. That's what's happening. So just don't mind that. You know, there's a lot of things that we may know that we've learned. There's been many times agencies have reached out to us, and we've had several calls with our accounts payable folks and our organization administrators, kind of talking about some of the ways we've done things and the ways we've kind of had struggles here and there. You know, I can't really offer up the AP people and say, yeah, we'll do plenty of calls, but if that was something that folks were interested in, I'm sure we could. And it would be informal because we're not the experts, but at least you could kind of hear from those guys what it applies related to contracting. Now, I will also say ODF is using this for all of our payments. So we're not just doing contract related payments through this system. So there may be some of the struggles we have that you wouldn't encounter. But we're definitely happy to share whatever we can to make life easier for you guys.
That'd be really great, actually.
Oh, and somebody asked about spots. So that's one thing I think we all really need to kind of talk about at some point. And I know it's a hot topic, so I don't want to say, yeah, we got to dig in right now. But even today, I got some questions about Amazon, you know, and how we're using Amazon and Amazon Prime accounts. And so spots cards will be able to be recorded and used through the Oregon Buy system. There is a way to do that for a user. We have not done that yet, but we are intending on trying to connect those dots once both pieces are in place for us.
Awesome. That sounds great. And it looks like we have Salem, your hand's raised.
Yes. Yeah, just want to add to what Melissa and Shannon mentioned. We're in Oregon Water Resources in wave 1 too. So one thing that we've learned is we're seeing is that it would have been a lot easier for us if we had revisited internal processes from solicitation all the way to payment. So I know the earlier training pretty much dealt with the contracts, you know, more than anything else. But to include the accounts payable folks, you know, the item receivers and the end users, it's really important to involve those. However, you know, the other agencies can discuss that internally before they start their waves. That would be really helpful to be able to, because there's a lot of items discussed that's pretty much above a level of understanding to those who have been doing just receiving the items compared to the accounts payable. So it might be helpful to go through that and kind of get ready to ask questions as to how will Oregon Buys make that process work for your agency. So
Awesome. Thank you. That's such great feedback. I know some of us were involved in a kind of a work group that I think happened just prior to wave 1 that was doing exactly that. And I will say it was a lot of work. Definitely. I think just proof that, you know, things can be done a whole lot of different ways, right? And have a lot of different processes with a whole lot of different people involved. So I totally agree. I think that's super helpful for us, the rest of us, as we prepare to get closer to the waves. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Amber, this is Darwin.
Oh, hey.
addition item. I agree with everything that Melissa said. In addition to that, truly understand the difference between expenditure authority and procurement authority.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because
Absolutely.
they will cross in the system. So thoroughly understand the difference, and they mesh in the system. So make sure you understand the difference.
That makes a lot of
Darwin,
sense.
you make a great point. This is Shannon. With our tiered delegation, our current, well, a couple of years renewal ago, we went into that same issue because our authorities policy did not outline the difference between procurement, budget, and expenditure. And so we have a new policy for authorities approved. People are still trying to learn those differences. And as we start connecting from requisition through final payment, we have to think about those authorities. And is Oregon Buys going to be our system of record for those authorities? And how do you do that? Because somebody's going to need more for some reason or another. And how do you go through that process? So I absolutely agree. That's really important to think about, understanding the difference between the two, at least budget and expenditure and procurement.
So, and I will echo that from ODOT's perspective. We did clarify this in our delegations a couple years ago in preparation for Oregon Buys. And there are different things. There are people that can sign claims, meaning they can approve invoices for payment. There are different people who can obligate money to a contract for out of their budget for the expenditure. And then there's the procurement authority, the people signing off that we are entering to the contract. So I think you really got to get clear about who has what responsibilities.
I agree. All right, awesome. Thanks, everybody. That was great discussion. I think that's, that very, very important to point out. And just watching how things trickle through and flow through the system, and what I have seen, I can see where those kind of elements and understanding those elements are so important. Okay, for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and move us on here. It looks like we're just a little bit behind schedule, not too bad. And so next will be DAS updates. It looks like Kelly, you're up first in regards to House Bill 2374.
Yes, I just wanted to follow up on an email I sent out a week or 10 days or so ago regarding the required reporting on preferences. And we're trying to really ask for your help to increase the response rate we're getting on that. I know it's burdensome, in particular if the particular solicitation you're dealing with isn't subject, or if it's on the C side of the code and preferences can't be applied. But that's a story we also need to be able to tell when we go back to the legislature. And really what's behind this, other than just implementing what the bill required, is trying to inform the legislature in a way as they're looking at potentially establishing additional preferences, letting them know what's already available in terms of preferences, how they're being used, and where we can determine why they're not being used. So I will be sending out to each DPO information if we have contracts in your shop where we haven't received responses. And I would just ask you to circle back with your procurement professionals, ask them to take the minute or 2 minutes maybe it takes to respond to those. I think it's 4 questions in a survey type format so we can have that data. We have to give a report back at the end of this year, and I would like to be able to have a pretty high response rate. So that's my ask on that one. Are there any questions around it? Okay, there's Mariah, there's a question about training. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Hi, this is Mariah. So it seemed like when the training was, I sent it out to all my staff to train on the link for House Bill 2375, and there were a couple of places where the training seemed to be in conflict with what the seasoned procurement staff understood. So I'm getting more info and we have a meeting to discuss it. And then, Kelly, do you think I should just direct those questions to you as far as the two areas? But one of them had to do with the treatment of COVID firms and veteran-owned businesses. And then the other one was the preferences around training. Didn't seem like that was equal. So there was just two areas in the training. I don't know if other people dug into the training or not, but there seems to be some confusion on those 2 points.
Mariah, I actually would ask you to direct your feedback to Darwin Kumpala, who manages our training program, and he'll work with his team to take a look at that.
Sorry, Darwin.
No problem. I just want to reiterate, everything that's in that training was pulled directly out of statute and rule. So if there are questions, send them, and then I can refer you directly to where we got it from. Okay? So anybody, any questions, concerns, please send it and we'll get you the answers. I'll just kick it over to John and have him do it.
All right. Well, we'll let you and John sort your workload out later, but I know you'll get a good look at that. Back to DAS updates. The only couple other things I would mention are obviously the legislature is soon to be back in town, so I wanted to. I don't know, Jay, are you on the agenda specifically for legislative updates? So if you are, we can wait for that. And then we are still in process of recruiting for and hiring an IT team manager in DAS procurement. First round interviews have happened, so thank you, Kai and Amber and Shannon, for helping with that. And the follow-on processes are this coming week to get that position filled. And I don't think I have anything else. Does anybody have any questions for me about what's going on in DAS procurement?
Kelly, this is Shannon. What is the competency-based training line? I'm interested in that because that applies to our tiered delegation possibly, and I was hoping to find out if that had to do with your new intermediate and advanced trainings and what that was covering.
So tied specifically to tiered delegations, no, but I think John Koljeski is going to speak to that question here in about, I don't know, 10 seconds or so. Okay, Amber.
Perfect. Thank you. So I think now, yeah, John, if you want to take it away with the competency-based training update.
Outstanding. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let me go ahead and share my screen with everybody, and I'll go ahead and drive. Everybody see the presentation, I hope? Okay, competency-based training. I'm just going to take a couple seconds here, a couple minutes to explain what we're talking about here. Essentially what this is it's a continuation of the development of the training program, which started back in 2016 based on the mandate from the legislature encompassed in ORS 279A.159. I'm giving this presentation because my position is that I am the the statewide training coordinator for procurement services, and that was established by DAS procurement services to meet the requirements of ORS 279A.159. Essentially, what my job is to develop and implement and maintain a training program to meet the mandates as encompassed in 279A.159. I am also basically in charge of the certification program. I work for Kelly Mix, the Chief Procurement Officer. Darwin Kumpala is my manager. So if you have any questions about procurement-related training or procurement-related certifications, please feel free to send me an email and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But what I'm going to talk about here today real quick is a little bit more about the continuation of the development of the training program. So what are competencies? Basically, they're a measurable pattern of KSAs, of knowledge, skills, and abilities that an individual needs to perform their work roles or to affect organizational effectiveness. This is based on Lominger Standard 67 competencies. Lominger and Associates is a company that published 67 competencies that are reflective of effective leaders and employees within the workplace. So we started with those, and you're welcome to take a look at those. But that's basically what a competency is, a measurable pattern of knowledge, skills, and abilities. There are many different types of competencies. The two that we chose to include in our program are what we call functional or technical competencies. And these are competencies, tasks, knowledge, skills, and abilities that we have already published. We published back in 2018, commonly referred to as the Oregon Procurement Body of Knowledge, the OPBOC. The OPBOC is a listing of competencies and then a listing of knowledge, skills, and abilities necessary for a person to be able to understand and to demonstrate a particular competency. What we've done now is we've added professional competencies to the OPBOC. Professional competencies, a lot of times people refer to these as soft skills, communications, leadership, business acumen, things of that nature. So we've added those to the OPBOC, and they are now available for managers to assign to their people to help them develop them in an organizational manner, to assist with organizational efficiencies rather than a specific job or task. How would we use competencies? And this is just a listing of different ways that you can use competencies: ensuring consistency, clear expectation, coaching, career planning, and recruiting. Once again, competencies are nothing more than a tool available to the manager to help develop their people and to help develop their organizational effectiveness and efficiency in a nutshell. And so there are a lot of different ways that we can use competencies, but once again, it's a tool for managers to help develop their people and their division or their department. So implementation of this process or this program, once again, we started back in 2018 with the initial publishing of the Oregon Procurement Body of Knowledge, the OPBOC. And so when we did publish that, you can see there's a whole listing of different tasks, knowledge, skills, and abilities. They're also divided out as to whether they apply to advanced certification, intermediate certification, or basic certification. And we've just continued this through into the new update to the OPBOC, which is developing professional competencies. So step one is we went out and we developed a listing of professional competencies. Lominger and Associates, which was bought out by Korn Ferry Incorporated, lists 67 competencies for effective leadership as well as effective employee development. What we've done is we've looked at that listing of 67 Lominger competencies, and we've come up with a list of 17 of our own. In addition to looking at the Lominger competencies, we went out and we looked at what do job classifications, what do the official HR job classifications say for procurement professionals? So we looked at the PCS, the PCAs, and the SPAs when we looked at that. So we looked at how well does the 67 bounce against those. We also went and looked out into the profession, into the procurement profession. We looked at NIGP, we looked at NASPA, we looked at various other organizations within the procurement profession to determine what are they looking at for competencies. Kelly, a couple years ago, went to a NASPO-sponsored event at Michigan State, and he came back with a series of competencies that they had listed out. So we took all of that together, and then we presented that to the Chief Procurement Officer, and we whittled that down to 17 competencies that determine professional competency within the procurement profession. So, and I'll show you where those are. Then we went and we updated the OPBOC. Once again, we'd already published an OPBOC that had all the technical competencies and knowledge, skills, and abilities in it. So now we've just updated to include the 17 professional competencies with their associated knowledge, skills, and abilities. And so let me see if I can call this up for y'all. And there it is. Excuse me for a second. Hopefully you all can see this. I'm just going to go ahead and maximize it. Okay, so here's the OPOC, and down at the bottom we have the professional competencies listed. As an example, communications is one. Develops and delivers multi-mode communications that convey a clear understanding of the unique needs of different audiences. These are the knowledge, skills, and abilities necessary for a person to be able to develop the communications competency. So number one, this gives the manager the ability to assign these to a person during an assessment period for them to work on, either based on career development or a noticed deficiency in their performance during the previous session. So we can look at these. The other thing it does is it allows you as the agency to determine what training to send your people to. So we're going to list out, or we're going to provide you with a list of recommended trainings that meet the KSAs associated with each of these competencies. But we want to give you the option for you to go and find your own, or maybe for you to develop your own. So what you would do is, if you're trying to develop a communications related training, you would look out here and say, okay, one of the KSAs is recognize or use correct English grammar, punctuation, and spelling, communicate information in a clear, accurate, succinct, and organized manner. So you would use that as one of the goals or foundations for developing a training either within your agency, or if you were to go out and look maybe to a Portland State or someplace else for development of that particular KSA for that particular, for that particular competency. So, and also we've got out here whether it's a basic, an intermediate, or an advanced KSA knowledge, skill, or ability. And you could use that then to say, okay, this, like a basic one, that's really not appropriate if I have an SPA, but you can always look back and say, does my SPA demonstrate a mastery of oral communications? Okay, and then assign them training accordingly. All right, and then last, identify and implement training which supports development of professional competencies. Yes, we already have a website out there. It's part of the training website where we have posted training that is acceptable for use. Let me see if I can get this. Okay, so this is available off of the training webpage. So these are all the trainings that have been submitted to DAS Procurement Services for us, to determine whether they are applicable to the for use in certification. All right, so we got the number of hours and whether it's OPPT or other type of training. This will be enhanced so that if you have a need to develop a communication competency within your people, look at the KSAs there, and then you'll be able to look at this listing here to determine a pre-approved class that you could send them to, or once again, you can select a class of your own choosing to send them to, as long as they meet the requirements as stated in the OPBOC. All right, so that's where we're at right now. We have identified the professional competencies. We have updated the OPBOC, and we are currently in the process of updating that professional or that development, the training list, so that you can either pick from there or develop your own. Just some resources. This book, FYI for Your Improvement, I highly recommend if you are going to be using competencies as part of your toolbox, as part of your employee professional development process, that you get this book, because it lists all 67 competencies and it gives you examples of underutilization, proper utilization, overutilization and expert utilization of that particular competency, so you can determine where your people are in that particular area. So I highly recommend that you get that book. Once again, if you're planning on using the competencies, especially the professional development competency. And one of the last things that this professional competency does is it increases the number of contact hours that your people can attain to use towards their certification. Okay. Some of those contact hours will be what we call other training and education. But a lot of that training will also count towards Oregon Public Procurement Training contact hours, as long as there's an assessment associated with the class. And so that opens up the availability greatly to how many contact hours are available. So that in a nutshell is what I wanted to discuss with you. So if anybody has any questions, I am available to answer those for I guess I got a couple minutes left over. Anybody have any questions?
We do actually have some in the chat. It looks like comments and then questions. Looks like everybody knows the slide deck is posted on the DAS Procurement webpage. So thank you, Kimberly, for that. And let's see. Shannon, am I missing anything?
And Amber, you don't have to read mine. Essentially, my concern is related to our renewal of our tiered delegation. One of the things that is in there as of January 1st, 2023, my staff and I are expected to comply with the intermediate certification. And I have no idea what that includes. I don't know what that means. I don't know if there's a way to bypass any of that, because my staff for the bulk have 10 to 25 years of experience. And so I guess my biggest question is, when are you going to roll this out, and when are we going to have an opportunity to understand the impact for folks like us? Because that's far beyond just new employee development.
So at least for part one of that, Shannon, I think that we could certainly come back to this group and give a presentation on the 3 certification levels and what's required for each. I suspect a number of your staff are probably almost there, at least for the intermediate. It just kind of depend on, in terms of their experience requirement. It may be that some additional training is needed, but we can certainly come back and present on that if that's helpful. So Donna, I'm more work for you.
Really quick, Kelly, I don't even know where there's a list of what classes are required for an intermediate certification. So I can't even sit down and see if my staff have had the required training. I mean, with 25 years experience, I know they can do it. They have great communication skills, or they wouldn't work for me anymore, for example. But I need to know what it is so I can sit down and assess what my staff are not able or cannot show they've done and are required to, so that we can meet the expectation. Because I haven't even seen that. So if it's out on a website somewhere and I didn't know it, I just need to know that.
Darwin, do you want to add to that? I think everything that they would need to know is on our training website.
It is. And the other thing is, Shannon, the only difference in the certifications are the exams, one. So the exam for the intermediate or the advanced certification would need to be taken. And then the number of contact hours of training that you would have to have in that period of time. Those are the only requirements. So they would have to take the intermediate certification exam and then make sure they have enough contact hours in which to get the certification. And John, if I'm incorrect on any of that, please slap me. I guess.
Are you guys going to ensure you have appropriate number of trainings available for our staff and other staff to do that? Because I know training, like everybody else, has had not enough resources. And I'm going to go out and look at it. I have some more concerns, but I'll take those aside because those are kind of on me. And maybe if I learn something, I can bring them forward. But I have some real concerns about it, and I want to go out and look at the website to see what's out there, because I didn't even know there was anything out there other than we've talked about it in these meetings as a future thing available. But maybe I missed something in that we rolled this out in an official way, and I just missed it. So thank you.
So what we'll do in addition to that is I'll have John get the information, provide it to him, and she can send out the information you're basically asking for. We'll provide that to you so you can review it from the website. So there's already a list of
Shannon.
trainings out there already done that qualify for OPPT training. So anything from that list, whether it's NASPO, NIGP, many other items that people have asked us to review, there's a long list out there besides our own DASH training. So hopefully that'll be helpful. Melissa, you had something?
Yep, Melissa.
I think she's on mute.
Shannon, I just wanted to know that we're ODOT's in the same boat because we have a tiered delegation as well. And I know this isn't relevant to everybody, but it is somewhat relevant for everybody to consider. So the contact hours are out there. And what we had to do was go in and have every one of our employees add up their contact hours to get the intermediate or the advanced to see where our delta was. And I will tell you, Das, that we have some senior people that only have 60 points, and it's been difficult to find the other points. So we've been asking for acceptance to certain things that we've been attending so we can try to get the points. But it is a big time commitment to get all those points. And I can tell you that my staff is struggling to get the points by 2023 because we still have to get the work done. And I can't have people out in training for a year to get points. So I think that's something we may need to talk to DAS about.
Yes.
And then for those that don't have tiered delegation, you may want your people to have those different levels because of their experience or their competency or want to build their competency. And if you're looking for that, you probably should do an assessment of their current points and where they sit in their points and what the delta is, and then determine what's going to have to happen to make up for the difference.
Absolutely. And I guess the other thing for me is, you've got to take basically 5 or 6 months out of the coming year because of fire season for us, and the fact that we just need to keep the, ship moving, much less actually moving forward. Let's not go backward. So I just want to make sure I'm prepared because I don't want to come to my renewal next year and go, we couldn't comply and have a bunch of reasons. Because my goal is to make sure it's reasonable and that we're doing what we need to do so that we appreciate the privilege of having that. So it is applicable, and everybody else needs to think about that too. It's great for onboarding of new staff, but how do you figure out the current staff you have and how they fit into these KSAs is something to definitely think about for other folks.
And then I would add to that for KSAs, the great thing about KSAs, I don't know if the DPOs had a chance to look at the KSAs before you guys put them in place, but you might want to have the DPOs look at it and give feedback because there may be stuff missing. But also, for succession planning reasons, it's good to know the KSAs and to know what the longevity of your employees are expected to be against the KSAs. So where you have gaps, and then also where do you have gaps that you need to bring training in to get those skill sets up. So it's a great succession planning tool as well.
All right. Awesome. Thank you very much. We have another question here. Are there plans to add additional training around IT procurement? The amount of contracts related to IT has increased 10 times at DCBS. Everything seems to be connected to IT. Yes.
I guess, you want to speak to that, Darwin?
Yeah, that is planned, but that's going to be future because there's plenty of work the training team already has on their plate to complete. Basic things that have been asked for in the past that we haven't had the time to get, and we have a plan to accomplish some of those this year. That one is added on, but we also need the expertise from our DAS IT team and others to help influence those classes and give a good class. And so that will take time. Okay. So it's not going to be immediate. Good
I
question.
guess my last question is related to the KSAs for the additional certifications. Are you focusing your training priorities on the classes that will be required from that, whether or not something's available for another entity or not? Because really, in my mind, if DAS teaches a topic, I'm going to want to have them look at DAS as the topic leader versus anybody else. Because, for example, NASPO is great, and I love all their training, but it takes everything Oregon out of it and puts in everything nationally, and so that's really hard for folks. So I guess what I want to do is make sure that if we're going to be putting these in place and having expectations, that you guys are looking at the priorities of the classes. And for IT, for example, if there's some KSA, which I don't remember, it's been a while since I've looked, related to that, that you're going to provide opportunities for people to have that training now, since they can get the certifications now.
So let me speak to a couple pieces there, if I could, and then Darren, I feel free to chime in. And Amber, let me know if we're taking too much time, please. But I guess the first point I would make is thank you for the feedback. Secondly is DAS procurement currently offers enough training to meet the training requirements for all 3 levels of certification. That is there. We do not offer DAS-led classes to meet all of the KSAs that John was just talking about, and that's why we have been working over time to develop that list of courses that have been vetted and approved, whether those are from NASPO, whether those are courses that maybe ODOT sponsored for their staff. But I would encourage you to keep in mind that our core responsibility continues to make sure that we're providing the training needed to meet the legislative requirement for procurement training. And we have 2.5 trainers, so that are focused full time on that work. So you can get there taking DAS-only courses. I can't guarantee you how quickly you can get there. We offer our courses on a quarterly basis. So you won't be able, if you're just starting, you won't be able to get all the training points you need in a quarter, or maybe even in 2 quarters. But we do offer enough classes to get there. So those are the 2 pieces I would take. And then thirdly, we did preliminary work at an IT training course. I'm working with the state CIO's office in DOJ. Unfortunately, we had to pause that work because some of our staff who were working on it got detailed to doing emergency procurement work. That work is calming down, and so we're hoping to be able to get back to that later this year. So I would offer those 3 points. Michelle, I think you said you have a question, and you might be the last one we have on this topic.
Thank you, Kelly. I do have a question. I've looked at this. I'm looking at the intermediate testing this year, and it would be really nice. I've also looked at the advanced, which is my ultimate goal is to make sure I have all 3 certifications. But this year, my goal is to get my intermediate. And, I've reviewed the OPBOC, I've reviewed, what the requirements are, but what I would really like is a class, whether it's a half a day, a full day, working with other folks who are interested in taking the intermediate testing, and work together with DAS, whether it be with John or Darwin or whoever, and actually go over the material and talk to us and educate us, aside from us reading it and getting understanding on our own. But I've always found such value in talking with others, networking, and really vetting the questions. Because I will tell you, when I took my OPPC test and I did pass it the first time, I walked away believing that I did not pass it because what I studied was different than what the test questions were. And so it was very difficult for me. I thought, oh my goodness, did I not study correctly? Was I not on point? Was I not, really getting it? So I think there would be a lot of value in adding a testing class, so to speak, for those who are ready to test. Do your studying before, and then have your, testing group get together with the training and go over the material and talk about it, and so that we are really prepared for it.
I think that's excellent, Michelle. I'm kind of looking at John Koljeski and asking that he connect with you to kind of ferret that out. I know that we have prepared guides to those different certifications. So if you and John can connect and see what may make sense in terms of some kind of a prep course, I can only promise that we're open to talking about it. I don't want to speak for Darwin, or he'll turn my mic off.
I appreciate that, Kelly, and I would appreciate any help all of us could get from you folks, so that we can all be successful with these certifications. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it, and congratulations on passing. So Amber, I'm going to get out of the hot seat and toss it back to you now.
Sounds good. Okay, so it looks like next we have our legislature update by Jay. Are you here, Jay?
I'm here.
Awesome.
Hi everybody. It's that time again. Just when you thought it was safe to go near that big building with the bowling trophy on top. Starting Tuesday this next week, there'll be a 35-day short session. They have started to file the pre-session filed bills, and I have done an initial screening of the first 256 of those bills. I sent out a first report on the bills that I've marked for tracking. Hopefully all of you have received that email. If anyone has not received that report from me, would you please send me an email and I will add you to the distribution list. I also want to let everybody know that my plan is to update that report on a weekly basis, and I plan to hold weekly legislative conference calls, much like I've done in the previous sessions. And I will be asking Kim Wisdom to help me get the details set up, and I will send that information out to everyone. I would encourage all of you to participate as much as you can in those calls. I think it's helpful for all of us to share the information with one another. And then that's kind of the first phase. The second phase that can come of that is if everyone makes a point to be in contact with their agency legislative person, so that this is another one of those places where we really need to put some extra effort into making sure that procurement has a place at the table and has a voice that's being heard. Sometimes the legislative process just sees procurement as a leveraging tool rather than an essential function. And I'd also like to point out that this session, first of all, because it's only 35 days, in order for anything to move through, it's pretty much going to have to get a hearing scheduled almost right away. And we have some complicating factors that everybody should be aware of. One, with the short session of it's basically only a month. We have, on the one hand, we have a favorable financial forecast in that there's going to be more revenue than anticipated. And so there's already a battle brewing in terms of what this short session should involve. So on the one hand, the Democrats who have a supermajority in both houses, as well as control of the governor's office, are looking at spending a considerable amount of money, and I'll just give you a quick kind of a laundry list that I've identified. The good news is they haven't focused particularly on procurement, but they are looking at things like affordable housing, healthcare, job training, drought deterrence, timber harvesting, small business relief, expanding daycare, wildlife prevention, or excuse me, wildfire prevention, and criminal justice reform. That's a pretty ambitious agenda to move on in a month-long session. On the flip side, the Republicans have consistently taken a position that a short session is more for emergency situations and budget adjustment. So what I'm suggesting in all this is we have the beginnings of a battle already on what the short session should be about and what it should accomplish. That sets the stage for the possibility of some things we've seen in the past that would slow down the agenda, either a walkout or typically when bills come up for a vote, the general rule is the bill has to be read in its entirety unless that's waived. And basically they do a waiver if there's no objection. So one of the tactics that can be used is literally as each bill comes up, there can be an objection raised by an individual legislator, which would require the reading of the bill word for word, which tremendously slows down that process. So those are a couple of things that may come into play. The other thing is, as we saw in the previous session, if we have positive COVID reactions in the building, that can also interrupt the process. So in all that, I'm saying that there's a tall order here for this short session. The other thing I would mention is we've seen a large number of changes in terms of the legislators due to retirements, resignations, and people leaving their current position to run for other political offices. That translates into a lot of relatively new, inexperienced legislators being part of the process. Generally speaking, new legislators coming in are not necessarily real familiar with the procurement code and its complexities. So that's another thing we need to keep an eye on. So with that, I'm not trying to argue a particular position, but I am trying to say that this could be a little bit like the old Irish curse of "May you live in interesting times." Again, I see that there's some comments coming in. I will do everything I can to update the distribution list and keep that updated, as well as updating and revising the information in the report. I would ask each and all of you, if you're aware of a bill or if you're aware of activity on a bill that should be brought to the attention of the group, please let me know. I think there's tremendous value in us working together on monitoring the legislative process. With that, Amber, thanks for the time, and I'd be happy to try and respond to any questions that people might have at this time.
Jay, this is Archana.
Hi.
Hi, and my question was, and this is not just for Jay, but anyone else. What do you know about the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that just got passed recently? And then how much work are we expecting for the state and agencies, and in terms of FTEs, you know, the work that's needed and the funding that's coming through for all of the things that are funded through this act?
Okay, I think generally the way I'd respond there's kind of two different perspectives in the answer to that. From the legislative process perspective, I think the focus is going to be on directing money toward projects that involve one-time funding, rather than making a commitment for future funding. And that's a matter of trying to safeguard against a possible downturn in the economy in Oregon, which would result in a reduction in revenue from taxes. From the agency perspective, my observation has been that generally speaking, there are agencies that have or will have a influx of federal money that they need to distribute, and typically the distribution time period is fairly short, and so I think agencies are going to be somewhat hard pressed to figure out how to set up that distribution process and carry it out in a timely manner. As an example, if I'm not mistaken, the Department of Education fairly recently had mentioned that they had only figured out kind of their plan for distribution of about 10% of the federal money that they anticipated receiving. So it creates a rather strange problem if you think about it. It's kind of a hurry up and figure out how to spend the money type problem. And one response that I have heard is, my understanding is that the governor's office has named a policy position to be in charge of monitoring and making decisions regarding that distribution. How that lines up with what this legislature may try to do in the short session, I don't know yet, but I think there's going to be some interplay there. If I can back up a little bit, the other thing that I didn't mention that adds to why I think this legislative session is going to be different than anything we've ever seen before. On top of all the things we've recently experienced, like with COVID and the remote hearings, we're into an election year. There's going to be a number of changes in leadership and a number of changes coming in elected positions. In the world of politics, that means that the situation's ripe for a lot of maneuvering and alliance building to determine who's in what leadership position. That can affect the rest of the legislative process, And to your point, I think it can also affect that distribution process of the federal money. Now, that's maybe more than anybody wanted to hear on that, but that's kind of to the extent that I have any kind of clear vision in my crystal ball at this point. Those are the things I'm seeing. Does that help at all?
Thank you. Yes, yes, it did. I just had a question came across my desk on what the impact would be for our division. And so I was just looking to what others might have, what kind of responses others might have made from other agencies. But thank you. Yes.
Well, I mentioned education earlier. The other real obvious one is ODOT, which is going to be looking at some serious infrastructure money.
Correct.
And I can speak to that. This is Melissa. So certainly there's going to be designation of money. A big portion of the money will be granted to local governments, cities, and counties. And so one of the things that we need to look at in my office is the impact is going to be on our resources from a procurement standpoint, and what procurement resources will I need to help with some of that work. But the other part of that is, how do we grant money? How do we do that in a way, if the infrastructure bill has strings attached to the grants, how are we going to do that? And we've talked about contracting out for some of it, grant writing and the grant process, but we're just in the beginning stages of those conversations. But what we do need to be thinking about is the policy option packages that might be needed for 23-25 for resourcing our procurement shops if we are getting a big influx of money, and what that looks like. And you need to be doing that now, because you need to get those policy option packages in now. And the difficulty is, the first thing people do is go to, well, how much work is there? Well, we don't know, because we're still planning how the work is going to be divvied up, or how much money. We know generally how much money ODOT's going to get, and we can look back to OTIA and other infrastructure packages that have come our way in the many years. As Shannon says, I'm dating myself, for those packages, and what amounts of those packages were, and then what kind of procurement resources you did. So I can just tell you that I have basically estimated how many positions I think I'm going to need. But the agency is still figuring out what they're going to do, how the money's going to go, how much is going to stay, how much money can be applied to current projects, transportation projects across the state, like the bridge replacement, the I-5 Rose Quarter, and we all probably have our opinions about that. But just some of the projects that we already have in the works. Plus, we have a lot of bridges that need to be upgraded to good condition. So a lot of that money will go towards that. And so we definitely are looking at our resources. But my second concern, and this is something that really concerns me, is the ability for the Oregon firms to be able to be responsive to that amount of work in a short amount of time, with all of the shortages we have in the labor industry and in many industries, but definitely in the labor industry. And we're already seeing shortages in places where people are having trouble finding people to do the work. And it's not just finding people, but people that are experienced to do the work. And then you're also we're starting to see a lot of increases in our costs for our contracts, upwards of 30% increases, because they're having to pay people more money to keep them or bring them on. So now we have some fierce competition in the industry for the different industries trying to make sure they can get people and keep people to do the work. So it is a bit challenging, I think, at this point in time to kind of figure out what that looks like. But I would just really encourage anyone who's going to be receiving this money to really be talking to your budget people. really be talking to the people who are making the planning decisions, seat at the table. So you kind of understand generally what they're going to do, and then think about what you might need and get your policy option packages put together. And you'll have to make decisions about whether it's limited duration positions or if it's permanent positions.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Lisa. That was very helpful.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I'm on the every other week there's an ARPA funding meeting essentially that happens, and there's been a lot of talk about this. And I know Lindsay Baker from ODOT is there, and so there's quite a few. There's a lot of different conversations about this. My understanding, and part of this is just wondering, like, what are we going to have to do to manage these things, right? Like, what is that going to look like? And so that's where some of the management around this could be even outside, right, of even that initial writing. And then absolutely, I know with different funding streams that are coming out, there's different periods of time, of course, that these need to go out. And some are very immediate and some are, okay, spend it by 2024, right? And so that is a big conversation. My understanding from the last update I heard is that they're just about there with the agreements as far as the agreements where the DAS will do with the agencies to essentially give them the money and then also give us the parameters that we need to make sure are included in our agreements and the tracking that's going to be involved with those. So I know just from we're nervous, like just from a reporting standpoint, for sure. From my agency, we had a fair amount of money that was is coming to us, but I know for a lot of areas, ODOT, Business Oregon, there's some big, large amounts of money going out the door. Yeah, I agree. I mean, think about it big picture, not only the writing, but also the management of those agreements that are going to be going out. So let's see. Looks like there's another question. I think let's see. There was a question. There's actually been several. Let me get over here. Here we go. Time too. Oh yeah, we are definitely a little bit behind. There's some questions in the chat. I think, thank you, John, for answering all of those questions there in the chat directly. That was helpful. Looks like, okay, so how well, there was a question about the resource estimating tool that you're using, Melissa, from Josh. How well that is working for you and if you made any adjustments to it from your first presentation.
Are you talking, I'm not sure which resourcing module are you talking about, Josh? Are you talking about the workload allocation process that I use? Or are you talking about?
I think that was the tool that you presented on like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, so we still use it, but I will tell you what we have done is we've been able to basically look at our touch time for all the different kinds of transactions that we have to actually understand how much time it takes for a person to process an amendment or a RFP. And we got some general information about that, and not general, but very specific information. And we're now able to compare how many production hours a person has in a year compared to the number of transactions that they've done and how many hours it should have taken them to see if we're, using our production time. And I was able to take that, and then I brought in an intern to actually do some regression modeling so I could actually look at what has our past been since 2015 from our workload, and what increases have we seen in the workload, and then what can we predict the increases will be over the next 3 to 5 years. And it's a much more advanced than just the workload modeling.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, let's see real quick. Great other immersion teams. Let's see, where is their training? This came from Shannon. Where is their training on grants since they technically fall outside of the procurement rules? I think that's back to the training team.
I think it was actually, some folks have answered it, honestly. No, it's okay. Partially it's because I know it falls out of the procurement rules. And so it's not on, DAS procurement services to come up with those trainings. but we now have 2 positions we just received that will be assisting on grants. And I even feel like, I mean, I have enough knowledge to get myself in trouble, but I'd really like to understand more and know where those resources are for my staff I'm bringing in. And if a lot of people are getting that kind of money, it might be good for a resource for all of us.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a good question. Okay, we are definitely a little bit over time, but I am going to go ahead and give some of the wrap up time to Karen Johnson for a quick DOJ update. If you're here. Oh, yeah.
I'm here. Good
Hi
afternoon,
there.
everybody.
Thank you.
Glad to see everybody. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Karen Johnson. I'm a Senior Assistant Attorney General with the Department of Justice, and I am DAS Contact Counsel. So I come to all the DPO meetings. So I'm here for general questions. That's usually why I come. And then, of course, to report on what DOJ is doing. So about a year ago or so, I came to the DPOs and said, hey, we're going to revise our legal sufficiency rules, which they need to be done. So we've been looking at it for a long time. The DPO Council got together a group, made some great suggestions. We incorporated them, and just as you would know, things changed dramatically at DOJ last November when Mark Williams retired. So everything got kind of thrown into a new hopper, and we are now re-looking at the legal sufficiency rules. I'm going to tell you right now from the meeting that I was on prior to this one, it's going to be a more significant revision of the rules than what we had originally intended. We have 4 meetings set up for the month of January. Hopefully we'll get our work done, and then at that point we'll be in the point where we'll have another draft set for everybody to look at. We do want to start a rulemaking, and we do want the DPO Council to be our RAC. So you guys are going to be involved, which thank you. I can't thank you enough. So that's the status. I wish I had more to tell you, but that really is where we're at right now.
So Karen, when you
Yes.
say there's going to be significant rulemaking and that you've looked at our feedback and you're incorporating it, I know that that may not mean everything, but would you say you're looking at our work that we did, because that was a lot of work for us, from a positive regards perspective, and how you can make it work, or if you can make it work?
We're looking at it very positively. Melissa, you know that, we asked for your input and we really wanted it. So we are looking at that. I can't tell you that we're going to make all the changes that you requested. I can't tell you that you're going to get everything that was on your wish list. I can't tell you that. But I do know there's a lot more changes that will be coming than what I had thought I would tell you in last October.
Well, I think for the folks that were in the subcommittee for this work, many of us are on the phone. We're glad to hear that. And I know that I keep pressing on you folks behind the scenes, like, what are we doing with the rules? But I appreciate that update. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. And again, I apologize that it's taken so long, but you know what government's like, you guys. We're all working in government.
No, thank you. Thank you for the update, and thank you for keeping us involved. And I'm sure if there's questions along the way as you guys are having your meetings, I'm like, wow, that's a lot of me. That's encouraging to hear 4 meetings coming up right away. So that's very cool. But I know if you have questions, I'm sure you'll be bringing them to us and discussing those at that time. Perfect.
Absolutely.
That is so great.
And I can bring questions or concerns back to the team too. So just,
Awesome.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
And
all right.
Amber,
Yes.
really quick, this is Shannon. Just as
Hey,
a process item, one of the things we talked about earlier was a committee to kind of revisit these things. So we may want to hold off on that until we really know where DOJ falls in those threshold changes.
Absolutely.
I would wait, Shannon. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Because I can't tell you right now. I don't have a sense right now, just to be honest with you.
Do we, can we maybe, and maybe it's just for the next meeting even, but can we get since it's a more expanded conversation than it originally was, where it looks like there could be more, would we be able to sort of find out what things potentially are being considered, right? With no promises, but just sort of, hey, here are the items that are for sure being looked at to see if if, all the items we're curious about are being considered, that sort of. Oh,
Yep, I'm happy to do that. Right now, I would tell you a lot of it's, you've got a whole bunch of lawyers picking a rule apart. As you can guess, we're down to what does this word mean?
Got it.
So.
Shannon, I would just suggest that we not wait for DOJ on a legislative concept for threshold changes in other parts of the statute, because we need to get those LCs starting working sooner than later, as Kelly mentioned earlier, because there's a lot of work that has to be done. And sometimes it may involve Kelly going to his legislative folks to have legislative conversations with folks. And if we have a lot of people turning over in the legislative branch, some of it will include education on why we're making changes and what that means to the legislature for their consideration. So I would suggest we not hold off on that legislative work, that we move forward, and hopefully they'll align, or at least we'll be able to, during the RAC, talk to Karen about what we're trying to achieve on the rule side, the statute side, the statute changes we want to make, and see where we can get alignment through the Rules Advisory Group for their rules.
Melissa,
before you do that, I'd like to just talk to Melissa on that issue. So are you thinking about changing the procurement code, or are you thinking about changing the legal sufficiency rules? And
we're talking about the procurement code.
Oh, that's what I thought, because when I heard that initial discussion, I thought you were thinking about raising the 150 right now to the 250 for at least formal procurement. Is that kind of what I was thinking I was hearing?
For intermediate procurements, we talked about raising the threshold to 250,000, and maybe we want to go higher. And there's a couple reasons why, just so everybody hears. One is we need to make the process easier and not be a barrier. And there's a lot of requirements that are kind of in our way to make things efficient as possible and get things executed quickly. But we also have the equity and the social justice needs that are happening across the state and across the United States, for that matter. And, raising the threshold will give us a bit more flexibility to continue to be inclusive and make the processes easier for small business to interact with us, or disadvantaged businesses to interact with us. So I think that we're talking about the public contracting code changes and understanding how we might align thresholds in multiple different arenas.
Melissa, you're exactly right, and I think that we need to begin the work in early February. There are a number of elements that we'll need to consider as we do that work. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is certainly one of them. Other pieces that we've already mentioned on this call, and which provides the background for taking a legislative concept forward. When we better understand what DOJ's proposed rule changes are and how those may tie into a legal sufficiency threshold requirements, we can make adjustments, but we in terms of what we may want to take forward. But then also the legislative concept process, for those of you who haven't been in it, is a long process, and often what comes out at the back end is not what you put in at the front end. So I think it's important for us to do the initial work, and then for us to get a placeholder, us being DAS, then that has to be vetted through the DAS exec team even before it moves any further. So I would say let's get started, and we'll work on it and see where we get, and then we'll circle back with Karen and tell her what we wanted to do with her rules. I think that's how it works, right, Karen?
Right. I was just going to say the statutes are going to drive what we do. So if you guys are going to change the procurement code, that drives what we do, just so you're aware.
Right.
So don't wait for us. That would be what.
And I think we had talked about in some meetings, they would even it'd be asking for you to be included in some of those conversations, Karen, as well. So hopefully if we can just all stay aligned as we move along, that would be ideal.
Absolutely.
That'd be great. Yeah, because I've got ideas too. The world according to Karen would be great.
Right?
Well, that's a whole different kind of meeting. So back to you, Amber.
Well, Karen, I would welcome you to give your ideas. because
Okay.
I think we need to find ways to make this process easier
Yep.
to navigate for us as agencies as well as our industry.
We
And
absolutely do.
so,
Yep.
I agree.
and right now,
Yep.
it's a bit cumbersome.
It is hard. I will agree totally with that. Absolutely. You got me on that one, Melissa. Totally.
I agree. I think as much as we in agency land are kind of like, oh, it's too hard. I also have a lot of sympathy on the DOJ side because I know our attorneys are bogged down on the regular, it seems. I mean, just constantly overworked just the same way we are. So I agree. I think it would be a benefit to everyone. Okay, so it looks like we've got 3 minutes. So let me see, and there's one, wait, okay, we're good. In case you don't get to round table, there's a discussion within other agencies regarding adding DEI language to procurements. I'm hearing this as a discussion at DOJ. Yes, I've been hearing the same kind of things. Does anybody have any information about that? That's not just talk.
Well, this is Josh.
Josh.
My leadership, well, when I started with Business Oregon, someone at the governor's office asked me to start considering DEI language to be added into our procurements. I think the original ask was, can we put in preference language? I immediately was concerned about preference language just because of what that means. And so had some conversations with DOJ. I think they're fielding that topic right now. I think in the interim, until they have a decision, my question is, can we use language not necessarily depicting preference, but encouragement of those who fall into DEI categories, like BIPOC? I see the language in HR recruitments that go out statewide. Can we use encouragement language for procurement? So I think that's and I have some language I could share as an example of what's out there, and I can post it in the chat, but can we use something like that? And I guess more importantly, if that is a consideration, can we come to a consensus on standard language so that we're all using the same language? So that way it's agreed upon by all agencies. So, and then, sorry, one more thing. And then, so I mentioned to my leadership that I would bring this up at DPO today. And then as I was heading out from my management meeting, they said, can you also ask about sustainability language? And I said, I'll bring that up too. So I'll drop that there.
And I also want to bring up that we need to get back to Senate Bill 470, I believe, which deals with some language that we don't have in our contracts. And I need to talk more about that in a future meeting, Amber, as well, okay, which also deals with the preference. And it's in the space of climate change. And so we're struggling. And I think we need to get this back on the table. Jay, you did a rule about this, but basically said the agencies need to comply. And the problem is that we don't have languages in our contracts about this or even how to evaluate it. And I think it was a complicated statute anyway, but we still need to come back to this topic. And I think it was 470 or 475 from a couple of years ago, and it was supposed to be implemented in January last year.
Okay. We'll put that down. And I think the last we had talked about as far as language, and I think maybe I think the safe answer, right, is to talk to DOJ. I think that's what we were told to do, is work with our particular people with DOJ on that language. However, I do agree. How amazing would it be if we all had similar language, right? And we don't end up with a bunch of different languages based on different types of contracts and different attorneys. So I don't know, Karen, what would be your suggestion there as far as, I mean, are you still kind of leaning to talk to your respective attorneys, or is this something that you would potentially be able to carry back for us, that as agencies we're looking for maybe some language that we can all collectively use so that we're all kind of, the same template language on, of course, depending on the type of contract.
I think each agency probably needs to work with its own contact counsel, but I think if you want it in templates, you have to work with DAS and DOJ. And business transactions usually is who takes on the templates along with DAS, but that would be the way to get any language into the templates. And I'm assigning work for Kelly.
Kelly. Yeah.
Yeah.
His hand is raised.
And I'll take 20 seconds just to speak to Josh's question, because I know we're out of time. Josh, be very cautious about including that specific language. Language that works well perhaps in recruitment doesn't work well in procurement. Two very, very different things. Secondly, so talk to your attorney. Secondly, I am expecting, as the work of the Racial Justice and Equity Commission subcommittee on DEI and contracting, as that work wraps up, we are expecting a new governor's executive order to come out of that that'll speak to this issue. So I think we'll probably want to wait for that direction from the governor's office before we move too deeply into crafting contract language around this. So if you wouldn't mind bringing this back around as a topic for this group, maybe we'll be able to spend a little bit more time on it. And with that, I'm going to be quiet now, Amber, I promise, and give it back to you.
All good. Okay, awesome. Well, I think we are actually 3 minutes over time, so I think this has been great. The last thing I wanted to mention just really quick, we, and it looks like sometimes we have time in meetings, sometimes we don't, right? So, but getting back to sort of our, we don't have time for a roundtable at the moment. If you have anything you'd like to share, I would say, hey, let's pop it in the chat. As we can all kind of continue to see this since it's open. The other piece I would say is also just sort of those, I don't know what we call, I guess we call them little agency presentations that we've had in the past of just sort of learning about other agencies. If someone's interested in doing that for your agency, it doesn't have to be super long and crazy, but just letting us learn a little bit more about what we do or what you do, and how we might be able to connect with you, right? If we have similar type things, I think it's just always helpful for us to learn about that. So if that's something you're interested in doing, again, you can pop it in the chat, get a hold of Kimberly, Kai, or myself. You know, any of us can obviously add to do that as well. So any, if there's any burning questions, like we can do a quick, any burning questions? All right. Otherwise, thank you everybody for coming today, and thank you for your time. I think this was a really great meeting, lots of information. Is there anything else? I've seen basic grant level training. Yes, I have two, Josh. Thank you for mentioning that. I was actually thinking that when somebody else was speaking. Yeah, I think we've got a lot, we have a lot to chat about and a lot upcoming. And Melissa, I'll connect with you more on the Senate Bill 470 or 475 so that we can talk more about presenting more on that and having kind of a dedicated time to talk about that to make sure we're all doing what we're supposed to be doing, since that was effective last January, is what I think I heard.
Yeah, that would be great.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.